long time.
Yeah, so, I just, want to present her, and, we'll do that in just a moment. You all know that Greg is gonna be taping, or I think taping is an anachronism these days, right?
It sure is.
Yeah, recording
Recording.
this event. We'll hope to get that up on our website so that if we want to review it later, or if you want to refer friends to it, it will be available to you. We're talking today about, or David will be talking today about Glacial Lake Pingree. And I've come to regard David, who lives in Elgin, as a kind of Renaissance man, because he has a ton of things that he is involved in. He's works for a public sheeting company, he's a senior executive, he's a blogger, he's a writer, he's an editor, he's a content creator, he's a professor, he's a pastor, and importantly for us, he has a Kane County certified naturalist training in his background. And I don't think there's anybody that knows more about Kane County and its geological history and how we got to be, the land that we got to be, built our windings on, than David Shaker. So we're glad you're here, and the stage is yours, my friend.
Well, that was like powerful. I'm suddenly impressed with myself. You know, this all started for me actually during COVID. If you would have asked me before COVID began if I knew anything about Glacial Lake Pingree, I would have said absolutely not. I wouldn't have known what you're talking about. But I've come to learn that my family lives in West Point Gardens, which is a subdivision west of Nessler Road, right at the corner of Nessler and 20. Nessler Road, if you drive up and down Nessler Road, you get kind of a ridgy feel, right? If you drive up Nessler, you are actually looking to the east down toward the Fox River Valley. You know, you can actually see kind of down into Providence, and boy, I bet you I can even see water towers on the other side of the Fox River from Nessler Road. It's just a really impressive view. And then on the other side of Nessler Road, you've got this definitely a ridgy kind of thing, and then you've got Fitchy Creek Forest Preserve, and then you go to Fitchy Creek Forest Preserve from Nessler Road parking lot. Even that, you kind of like, you're high, and then you kind of go low, and then you go into the west parking lot, and it gets kind of lower. And so during COVID, my granddaughter, who lives with us, who was in fourth grade at the time, third, fourth grade at the time, the buses weren't running. You know, school had started near the end of it, but the buses were still not running. And so I was responsible, because I work at home, I'm a remote employee, I was responsible for taking Kylie back and forth from work, for school. And so it didn't matter what road I went. It could have been Silver Glen, it could have been Plato, it could have been 20, even I-90. You start high in the east, and then you dip down. And then you go back up again. And I began to ask, what is in this in-between area? Well, as it turns out, there was at one time a 27,000 acre lake, which would have made it the second largest lake in Illinois, other than the Lake Carlisle, which is actually a man-made lake. And that lake, we know, because of the depth of the lake bottom sediment, probably existed for about 2,000 years. Between Route 47 and Randall Road. Between 64 and north of I-90. I mean, that's kind of the block that we're talking about here. So we'll
How far north?
north of I-90, toward Hunter. Okay. Yeah, toward like Freeman Kane and Binney Forest Preserve. We're all kind of in the hummocky areas of the northern part of Glacial Lake Pingree when the ice kind of melted in place, stagnant ice kind of melted in place. And so can you imagine a 300-foot wall of ice in your backyard? But this is actually an artist who from Wisconsin who created this, Ryan Lowe, of what he imagined the ice to be like around the driftless area of Wisconsin, which you know as the Galena area in northern Wisconsin. So thank you very much for the introduction. That's me. I'm Kane County Certified Naturalist. I've been that since 2014. It's a great program. It really connects you to the natural scene and to our forest preserves. Anybody here at Kane County Certified Naturalist? Okay, we got a few of you. Thank you very much. It's a great, fabulous program. I call this the 8 glacial wonders of the Fox, because really the Fox River Valley and this entire area is impacted by this presentation. I mean, this is what Chicago looks like now from space, with a lovely a bit of aurora. Where are we? Can you tell where we are, Kane County? There, all right? So that's where we are. Clearly no ice, right? Because all of that ice that has actually covered the Great Lakes and much of Kane County has retreated. But I found this from the Tribune, a geologist by the name of Wiggers, who said, Illinois is a flat border state, nothing but cornfields and private expressways. If you're interested in geology or the history of the earth, you better head to the Rockies, the Grand Canyon, New England. Nothing important ever happened here, at least not until Abraham Lincoln decided to learn the Well, Wiggers goes on to say, he doesn't believe any of that. Instead, Wiggers sees his native state as a place of vast geological diversity and interest, a place of 1,000 doorways into a vanished worlds, and nowhere in Illinois does he find more geo-excitement than in Interesting. Kane County, really? Kane County? Well, think about this for a minute. I've got my little marker there, where Kane County is, all right? Now watch, because you're about to see thousands of years flash before your very eyes. And watch the edges of these glaciers and where they go in relationship to Kane County. So as the glaciers move down, 31,000 years ago, 30,000 years, boom, across, back, across, over, back, across, over, back, across. So, has some impact. It's got to have some impact, right, on the geology of our county. So when I look at some of the maps, the geological maps, this is Illinois. See that wrinkly stuff to the east and to the north? Well, that's what happens when glaciers come back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. I mean, we have this wonderful, nice Silurian lake bed of St. Peter's limestone, nice and flat, nice great layers, right? Everything's beautiful, and then the glaciers came by, and that's what happened to Kane County and the area, right? It really wrinkled the place up, right? Do your beds look like that?
Yeah. Yes.
And some of the questions I think we need to ask about our county, where did all that water go? I mean, the edge was probably football field high of ice, and sometime covering much of Kane County. Where did all that water go? Well, flooding is a big deal when it comes to our county. This is our county. You can make up the shape, right? This, as you move from blue to green to yellow to red to the grayish and the whitish colors, you're moving in height, all right? This is clearly the lowest part of the county. This is called a LiDAR map. And the LiDAR maps are maps that where they shoot laser from airplanes and helicopters and anything overhead to get a feel for the relative heights. And so what happened at some point in time at an ice-walled glacial lake, probably somewhere around the Chain of Lakes area, broke. And a tremendous amount of water came swooshing down through Kane County. right? And there's quite an interesting division here, isn't there? You know, between the places that were really impacted by the Fox River torrent and the places that were relatively separated from the Fox River torrent. You know where you all are? There. Right? That's where you are. Right? Which is kind of an interesting space here, isn't it?
Yeah, really.
Interesting. These are all rivers coming out of this area. Right? And this is a really interesting space because this is high. This is about where Nestler Road is by me right here. This is about where 47 is.
Okay.
All right? And in this in-between area is where Glacial Lake Pingree was. Right? And not just, I should say Glacial Lakes Pingree. Because there was a time when there was water on top of the ice. So see these kind of more well-defined sections here? They're almost like plateaus. Here. That was all lake bottom on top of ice. All right? The ice was still there. Lakes were starting to form on top of the ice. And when all the ice melted, it formed a plateau. We'll take a look at that a little bit later. So, Fox River Torrent was a thing. Kankakee Torrent was a thing. Really affected a lot of geology in those relative areas. Fox River Torrent.
Nearby Fox River flows so quietly and uneventfully along that sometimes it makes me think of the words from the old hymn, "It is well with my soul." When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul.
Yeah, can you
Turns
imagine?
out, the Fox River is all that remains of a massive glacial cataclysm that occurred about 18,000 years ago. This was when Lake Michigan lobe of the vast ice sheets that had crept into Illinois in the last ice age was melting. This was a stop and start process, with the glacial lobe melting and then pausing, melting and pausing. Large ice-walled lakes were created during this process. So one day, perhaps on a pleasant, sunny spring morning, maybe 17,360 years before present, the ice dam of a glacial lake collapsed. The chain of lakes are the remnants of a vast glacial lake, so perhaps it was the walls of this lake that collapsed. A huge torrent of water burst forth and surged south, massive as a tsunami. This was the Fox River Torrent. The surging water overlapped a glacial feature called the Woodstock Moraine and scoured southward. Between present-day Algonquin and South Elgin are terraces and channels that were formed by this flood. Glaciers act more like conveyor belts and bulldozers, with the pressure of the ice above forcing material from under the glacier out and under the front, creating moraines along its foot and sides. As the giant ice sheet melted and retreated, water filled the area between the foot of the glacier and the moraine. It must have been a spectacular sight, as the ice-cooled water deepened year after year, creating a huge impoundment. Then one day, the natural dam gave way. A catastrophic flood rushed southwestward, washing and grinding everything before it. The unprecedented flood may have created a cataract nearly 100 feet high, as it crashed along its course, carrying huge boulders and giant chunks of ice with it, gouging and washing its way through the till previous glaciers had laid atop the primordial bedrock. The end result of this catastrophe was the Fox River Valley we see today, which was created, geologically speaking, in a relatively short period of time by that single, astonishingly destructive event geologists have named the Fox River Torrent.
Can you imagine? You know? Can you imagine that happening? I mean, we still see the place through the Woodstock Moraine here where you could have had a 100-foot high waterfall at one time. Right? And then broke through there, came through, left these point bars. This is where Sleepy Hollow is today. You know, it just is it's just slushing material down into toward the south, toward the Illinois River. So I mean, it would have been something like this. There would have been an ice-walled glacial lake that broke through, And that looks like nice little streams. It probably wasn't like that. Not to cause a Fox River torrent anyway. And then that area melted and formed that gap. Now this really should be interesting to you all because I think something similar happened to Lily Lake. And we'll be getting to that in a little bit. Not to the same, extent as the Fox River torrent, but certainly affected. So you've got a 300-foot piece of ice chunking off and forming a wave and overtopping a moraine. There's a good chance you're going to be able to cut through it at some point in time, in some weak space. And we do see that in the area. This is actually the dells of the Southern Fox. And this is no more glacial till. We're down to St. Peter sandstone here, which is also what the Stark Rock is made of. So all the glacial till has basically been washed away by the Fox River torrent. So some features that are of importance in this area, we do have a terminal moraine in this area. We have a bunch of recessional moraine. We have evidence of glacial lakes. And has anybody been to a Rutland Forest Preserve? Little Rutland, right off of Big Timber Road. Postage stamp, probably an island in Glacial Lake Pingree at one time. And it has a number of kettle lakes, which were chunks of ice that were stayed in place and formed little pockets of pond water. Really interesting little preserve, geologically speaking. Cames, we've got cames, and we'll talk more about those in a little bit. Those are conical shaped hills that were formed by glacial meltwater. Cames were actually formed by water that flowed from the top of a glacier down through the glacier, through a moulin hole, which is like a drain that forms a cone. But see, the problem is you cannot have a came if the glacier is moving, right? You can only create a came if the glacier is stagnant. And so there's a lot of stagnant ice here that kind of melted in place to form a lot of the features that we have in this area. Hills and hummocks, ponds, ups and downs and ups and downs. You see that a lot in this area, especially as you move toward Freeman Kane. So very much part of the topography of Kane County. Drumlins are features that are formed as glaciers are dragging and moving and leaving material, so they're teardrop shapes. But we also have some really interesting features called eskers in this area. So we kind of, in our mind's eye, think of this as maybe about where the Fox River is. And we actually do have an esker that's not east of the Fox, but actually west of the Fox. Water, at one time, did not flow into the Fox River. In glacial Kane County, water flowed into the Kishwaukee, not the Fox. Why? Because there's ice blocking the way. It could not flow into the Fox. It could only flow to the north and east. So the biggest esker, which is basically an underglacial river, that when the glacier leaves, it looks like a ridge with a delta, is a result of all this ice and this tunnel and all this material kind of melting down from the glacier and forming this ridge. We have one of the largest glacial eskers in Illinois, right here in Kane County, the Caneville Esker. It's in Bliss Woods. Remnants of it is in Bliss Woods. And when I say remnants, it's because it's been largely mined. Why has it been largely mined? Well, it's gravel. It's already material aggregate that's been separated out. The bigger stuff from the looser stuff, and so that's why those eskers are so valuable for mining. But we also have glacial lakes, but not little tiny ones. We have Glacial Lake Pingree. Again, 27,000 acres at one time. And that's where you are. You're in the foot. If you think of Glacial Lake Pingree as a pie or a boot, maybe a boot is better to think of it when you're down here. You're down in the boot area of where Glacial Lake Pingree was. All right, so we've got lots of lofty summits here. I really love the LiDAR because it makes you think like you're in the Alps here, right? But really, there's only 300 feet between here and there. But you know, it's pretty impressive. But can you see where Glacial Lake Pingree sat when you look at that one? Can you see the bowl of it? Yeah. Yeah.
Show us. Point it out.
Put it up.
Yeah. Okay.
That area right there.
So we're right by the A. Yep.
So we're going to take a look at a little bit of the high areas. Our first in Kane County, some of the caves and esker formations. This is kind of a nice video.
It seems like there's an awful lot of meltwater coming off this glacier. Where's this all coming from?
Well, this glacier is melting at a rapid rate, and we've been informed that we've lost almost 4 meters of ice just this summer alone, just in 1 year. So it's rapidly down cutting, and we've even noticed at the front of the glacier that it's been lowered even from last year. We have this meltwater channel, lots of water coming across the glacier, and it's dropping into a moulin or a mill well. It's just spiraling down to the base of the glacier.
Wow. And we saw something like that here at Kamloops, didn't we?
Well, we saw the end result, because what would normally happen is if there was glacial till on this ice, it would be carried in the meltwater stream as glacial fluvial material drops down to the moulin, and it would pile up to form a nice conical cane. From there, you get an esker, sands and gravel being deposited underneath the ice. What also may be happening, even though we don't have any ablation till on the glacier, is this meltwater may be reworking the basal till at the end of the underneath the ice and forming an esker there. So that may be happening. But this is the environment which starts the formation of these large canes and these big eskers that we see on the landscapes across the country.
Boy, can you imagine that happening right here?
Yeah.
So, 1,066 feet to 700 feet in the Five River Valley, right? Kane, Johnson's Mountain. Kane, well, Freeman Kane, duh. There's other Kamic areas around, like Elgin Country Club is another Kamic system.
And Sour, the Sour Forest Preserve, SAU, that's further south.
That's a Kane? Yeah. So there's lots of leftover areas, but what's important about this, caves can only be formed by stagnant ice. The ice has to be melting in place. Why? Because if the ice is moving, what's going to happen? Yeah, it's going to take that nice conical shaped hill or that esker and just scrape it back. So what happens, the ice came up to here, which is terminal moraine, moraine, melted back some, where we see all of our Kamic material, and then pretty much melted in place right here. I wonder if it wasn't stranded by the Fox River Torrent. That the Fox River Torrent kind of cut through the glacier here and left ice right here that was just sort of stuck. Right? Don't know. I don't have the science to prove that or not. That's just a hypothesis.
Well, once it's cut off,
Yeah.
it can't be fed anymore.
Yep. So then it's stuck. So have you ever did any sledding on Johnson's Mound? Yeah. Primo sledding. Right. And there's Elgin Country Club. Lovely. There's Freeman Kane. Also a lovely part of our county. So where's the fourth highest point in Illinois?
Kane County.
Right there. You recognize that? Microwave tower off of Route 47 by Burlington Central High School. That's where you're going to go to high school? Well, it'll be the fourth highest place in Illinois. Remember that.
Rocket Hill.
Yeah, Rocket Hill.
And we have a
great.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Nice. I gotta be a little parochial here because I'm now the part-time naturalist at Hawthorne Hill Nature Center, which is right there in Elgin. This is Route 20. This is Manda Road, and stuck in this bowl here, there is a cane right here called Hawthorne Hill. There's Elgin Country Club, which is a Kamic system. Manda Ridge Park. We have a little bit of highlands up here, but most of this is something called Grays Lake peat. So in other words, all the stuff that melted from all around here, ended up where Hawthorne Hill is. But what's cool about it is if you put the superficial geology maps on there and just layer that. So this is Henry Foundation, Henry Formation, Kamic material, which is high conical material. Here's where Elgin Country Club is, at upwards of 900 feet. LB is a glacial drift, which is again kind of undifferentiated rocks and material left in place by melting glaciers. And then they've got in this bowl here where two little ponds are Grays Lake peat. I'm now starting to refer to our nature center as the legend of Kane County, because it has absolutely everything except the moraine right there in 120 acres. So it's got it all. It's got glacial material and right down to Grays Lake peak. That's the oak that's at the summit of Hawthorne Hill by us, which is in the playground of Hillcrest School in Elgin.
An idea how old it is?
What's that?
Do you have an idea how old it is?
No, but I want to find out. I do. So we've got lots of hidden lakes. I mean, this lake is actually the kettle lake that's in Rutland Forest Preserve. And it's a really easy walk. If you go to the first big pavilion in Rutland Forest Preserve and walk around the back, you'll actually be able to walk the ridge around the kettle lake that was left when that hunk of ice melted in place. Up around off of Coombs Road, west of Burnage Forest Preserve. The land rises up, and there was a ice wall glacial lake plain there, and there's a bunch of kettle lakes in that area, and that little subdivision up there is just littered with these kettle lakes. Kettle formation I found was an adorable little video, which I think that was very telling how kettles were formed. Actually, up against the Marengo Moraine. There's my favorite little Rutland Forest Preserve. You've got these little high Kamic areas, 950, what have you, but then you've just got these tons of these little kettle lakes that are just right, just really super accessible. I mean, that's Big Timber Road right there, so it's John Doerr. Are you familiar with John Doerr? John Doerr was in charge of the Forest Preserve here for a while. John Doerr studied, where is it? I think it's here, yeah. John Doerr studied this bog right here as part of his master's degree thesis. And he came to the conclusion that the bog by Rutland there is actually older than Volo bog. The bog still exists, but it's been very much encroached upon by agricultural concerns, but still there. The remnants of that bog are still there, up by 90 and 47, in a little corner south of 90 and east of 47. But that was John Dewar's master's degree thesis, was on that little bog right there. So moving on, okay, we've talked about Kane's a little bit, talked about Esker's a little bit. We're going to talk about Glacial Lake Pingree. People have known about it and have called it Glacial Lake Pingree for over 100 years. And so this section here is in an old paper is called Glacial Lake Pingree. Here again, got this thing here, Glacial Lake Pingree. And with now these modern superficial geology maps, Glacial Lake Pingree. This purple stuff here is called the Quality Clay Formation. That's lake bottom. But these like pinker patches, those are called ice wall glacial lake plains, and they actually have the deepest lake sediment. Why? Because there are lakes that formed on top of the ice. And so they existed a lot longer, these plateaus, and that's why they are plateaus, and that's why they are raised areas, all right, in like the 47, Randall Road, 64, you guys are right here. So these are all raised plateaus that are the result of lakes that exist on top of the ice, and when the lakes melted, that lake bottom became a plateau. Right? So, our little picture again, this is where you guys are. It's really an interesting thing that happens here and here. What is going on there and there? So, we get to that here. So, imagine Glacial Lake Pingree sitting about right there. You are on Lakeshore. You've got lakeshore property. And if the glaciers existed and pulled back over this area, again, Glacial Lake Pingree, I pulled that from the superficial geology map. There's Route 47. Right, that's Silver Glen Road.
Oh,
wow.
All right. So that would be, what, Plato Road?
oh,
Plank? That's 20. And that's 90. So that's the 27,000 acres of glacial Lake Pingree. Those higher areas are chemic areas that were like archipelagos and the shorelines and what have you. If you've ever been to Muirhead Forest Preserve, that was actually a couple of islands. And really interesting islands because they're made of the same stuff as the moringa moraine. And what's happening now in Muirhead Springs is they've broken a lot of the farm tile. And Glacial Lake Pingree is coming back on Muirhead Springs. John Dewar said, there would be no epic farmland in Kane County if it wasn't for drainage, because this is all lake bottom. The Kane County Forest Preserve and Elgin, they collaborated on the purchase of this Jack Cook State Park, which I think is hilarious because Jack Cook State Park, not State Park, Jack Cook City Park and Forest Preserve is in lake bottom. And if you ever go to Jack Cook off of Plank Road and do stand and turn 360, you really get a sense that you're at the bottom of something. All right? And the city of Elgin thought that they could build soccer fields there because it's so flat. And then I talked to the mayor the other day and he said, what a crazy place that is. You know, it's wet most of the time. And I'm going like, I wonder why. I wonder why. So again, where are you? Well, you're like down here someplace.
Where's Johnson's Mound on that?
Johnson Mound's not in there. Johnson Mound's over here. Johnson Mound's is off the map.
Okay.
Yep. And it really isn't part, Johnson Mound really isn't part of this. It's part of the Elburn complex, so it's part of the material that's sort of dammed up at Glacial Lake Pingree. As is all of this area where we've got like Elgin Country Club and Freeman Kane and all that kind of stuff. That's sort of the eastern shoreline of Glacial Lake Pingree, if you will. And you really get a feel for that, like I said, when you're on Nestler Road and when you go into Pitcher Creek Forest Preserve. Actually, one of my favorite places to go is by Jack Cook Park. There's a little road called Switzer Road that goes between Route 20 and Plank Road. And Switzer Road is totally lakeshore. I mean, you look to the east and it goes up, you look to the west and it goes flat. You know, you just get the lake bottom morphology. And again, when I say lake bottom morphology, you know, all of these kamic areas, these high areas and what have you, they've all eroded. So there's like 40 feet of material on top of where the lake bottom is. And so it just has maintained the basic morphology, but there's still been a lot of stuff over time that's been piled up over top of it. The places that you can get kind of closest to where the bottom of Glacial Lake Pingree was is Pingree Grove Forest Preserve, back in the marshy areas of Pingree Grove Forest Preserve. I like to think of that as like the remnant of Glacial Lake Pingree. This is the pond at Jack Cook, and that's what Jack Cook area, lake bottom area, looks like, very flat. I'm going to talk a little bit here about ice wall glacial lake plains, because Dr. Curry, who I worked with quite a bit, was a real aficionado of the ice wall glacial lake plains because, again, they existed on top of the ice and they existed for longer, and so the lake bottom material was more interesting to him because it contained all kinds of stuff. So this kind of formation of an ice wall glacial lake plain, and well, not formation, this is where they are actually. So if we look at the terminal, a terminal moraine as being the Marengo Moraine, this is a cross section of Kane County, and hummocky material, let's say is where Freeman Kane is and what have you, and then we've got this kind of bluish purpley stuff, which is lake, the equality clay, silky clay, lake bottom, and then we've got, which is kind of this layer here, and then we've got these higher areas, which are the ice wall glacial lake plains that kind of melted down on top. And so as the ice wall glacial lake plains were melting, they kind of melted into each other, they formed a larger lake, and yet still maintained their kind of plateau feel. So where's the bottom of Glacial Lake Pingree right now? And this is a quarry in South Elgin. That's about how far below the surface Glacial Lake Pingree is right now, the bed of Glacial Lake Pingree. Right. So it's been filled in quite a bit over these past 15,000 years or so. Yeah, he's just showing me where the ice wall glacial lake plains are, and he calls them donuts because ice wall glacial lake plains are flat in the middle and raised around the edges, right? Because just think of a lake, and just think of the bottom of the lake, and the bottom of the lake is like this, isn't it? Right? They're like saucers, and so when all the ice melts, you get this plateau, and you get edges. So in the current superficial geology maps, there's an ice wall glacial lake plain, there's an ice wall glacial lake plain. We call that the leech, because it's got a kind of leech shape, and which is kind of a cool one because it kind of cradles right here, Burnage Forest Preserve. So they're all over the place, these ice wall glacial lake plains. And in the summer and fall of 2022, these are all the places that we cored into the bottom of Glacial Lake Pingree. So Dr. Curry had some money and he said, hey, David, you want to dig into Glacial Lake Pingree? And I said, sure, let's do it. So a coring operation went and started looking for Ice Age fossils. This is off of Big Timber Road and Tyler Creek, all across the northern tier of Glacial Lake Pingree. Let's see about this.
So this is what's called equality clay. It's from backwater. So, we found it down along like the Mississippi River where it used to flow, but it's real soft, greasy. And so when you feel it smears, it doesn't do anything else.
So that would be like bottom type material?
That is the bottom of Glacial Lake Finger. That they core down into, when you got an ice wall of Glacial Lake Plain, here's their coring operation here. And this is kind of a condensed version of ice wall of Glacial Lake Plain. But what happens is over the years is you've got sediment. You've got storms, you've got sediments, you've got hot, you've got cold, you've got stuff that kind of piles into these ice wall Glacial Lake Plains bottoms in these lenses. And so they like to take the coring equipment and go into these places and take a core of these things so they can determine, it's almost like tree rings in a way. You know, you can determine what is found at these different layers and these different ages, and so they can date all of this material. So this is just kind of the formation. As you got a glacier, starting to it's up against the Marengo Moraine here. I always like to think of it that way. Marengo Moraine, it kind of stops there against that terminal moraine. It starts to melt back. There's dead ice forms on top. They develop their own little lake bottoms, and those lake bottoms then become plateaus. Right. So that's an ice wall glacial lake plain. And ice wall glacial lakes don't look like that. They mostly, because the ice is stagnant, you have material on top of it. That's why you get all these lenses of sediment and organic material falling into it. And so the ice wall glacial lake plains would probably look more like that. Right? So the ice is still there, right? But it's got tundra material on top of it. And we did find some interesting stuff. This is what an ice wall glacial lake plain looks like. So they're not small. They're huge. I mean, this is an ice wall glacial lake plain that's west of the Marengo Moraine. And it has all the topography with the raised edges and all that kind of stuff as any of the other ones do. And this is those layers that you saw in that diagram, stratified soil. There's various things that are happening as the glacier is melting in warm weather, it's freezing in cold weather. You're getting various layers of runoff, creating all of these really distinct zones. And this is that ice wall glacial lake plain that you saw the picture of earlier. So super flat looking, but if you then take like a LiDAR image, you can see as it melted into this area, all those layers starting to be evident. There. And what do we find? Well, this is probably on top of the ice, before it all sort of melted together. It was kind of tundra-like. It very much might have been like this, and we have found mastodon skulls. There's a place called Mastodon Lake in Aurora where the Civilian Conservation Corps found like several mastodon skulls. Dr. Curry just called me this past week and said, would I like to be involved in a project by the University of Copenhagen to find mastodon DNA in Mastodon Lake in Aurora? And I said, well, Dr. Curry, that's fascinating, but I got a lot going on, and I don't know if I want to take on mastodons as part of my shtick here. But there is a really great website called Be Historic. If you guys are interested in the history of this area, Joyce and Brian Ostberg, retirees during COVID, started doing historical videos of this area. And they like to get into things related to mastodons too. So if you go to YouTube and you go to Be Historic, like Be Historic, and tell them, comment and say that I sent you there, because they've been great friends. They've been doing a lot of videotaping of stuff that I've been interested in too. But here's some of the fossils that we found in that sediment. Dryas intrigifolia, Maria martina, and some of these things you may be aware of. We've got things like dwarf willow and blueberry and all this kind of stuff. And all of these plants that we find in these core samples of Glacial Lake Pingree still exist. But where do they exist? Above the Arctic Circle. So, it's kind of lemmings. Have we found evidence of lemmings? We actually have. We found lemming poop off of Tyler Creek. Teeth. And this is what some of the various materials look like. The core samples come in 5-foot sections, and they go all the way down, and they can separate them in those 5-foot sections, and then participate. And you can see the layers, like I talked about, between the glacial melt and the freezing, the glacial melt, and material coming in, and storms, and then still, and then what have you. So you see all of those layers, and they can go all the way down to past the bed of Glacial Lake Pingree. I'm talking a little bit here about some forgotten coastlines and islands. I'm buzzing through this section only because I want to say this is, I love this picture by a Kane County Forest Preserve park ranger of Muirhead Springs. Because it doesn't look like some kind of Arctic island, as maybe it once was. This is a very important area as far as you all are concerned. This is Lily Lake Gap, which I'll be talking about here in the last 15 minutes. This is kind of an area up here. As you see, sort of a coastal area where the Freeman Kane is. Think of all the purple stuff as lake. The purple and pink stuff is lake. And all the orange and yellow and brownish and greenish stuff that's all, that's all the highland. Country Kennels on Route 20, I think it is. Country Kennels is a big dog kennel place, and they've got a really interesting property because they've got a ridge right behind them, and then if you look out from the front of their building to the south, it's all the bed of Glacial Lake Pingree. So they're like right on this sort of ridgy area here, and then here's where Fitchy Creek is. Again, kind of a shoreline area. That's where Glacial Lake Pingree is in connection to all of our forest preserves. So really still, the things that you're seeing in our forest preserves are directly related to the topography that was left by Glacial Lake Pingree. Everything from Freeman Kane, here's Fitchy Creek. Meister Corn's above the lake, right? Muirhead Springs is kind of in the lake. Bose Creek is in the lake. There's Jack Cook that I talked about. That's the bottom of the lake. Pingree Grove Forest Preserve is there. Apparently, at one time, they tried to build the town of Pingree Grove in a place that was actually lake bottom, and they decided to move it up into the ridgier areas that are here. You know why Plank Road is called Plank Road?
Yeah. Planks.
There's planks laid side by side by side by side. Now, there used to be an area of big timber by big timber, but there's not anymore. It probably went to form Plank Road, which was a toll road between Elgin and Burlington. Right? That's the only way you can get across that area. Because why? It was the remnants of Glacial Lake Pingree. Scenic canyons. Okay, now we're getting to what you're interested in. Because there are some significant, I think, canyons. Again, this is the bottom of Glacial Lake Pingree. Here is an area that is an outflow area, and you got this. That's where you live, right? That's one of the more significant water flow areas, aggressively speaking, besides the Fox River in Kane County. So here's another look at it, right? And have you noticed this when you're driving on 47? You're driving on 47, you've just gotten your bratwurst at Elburn, and then you're going north, and then right about here, there's a dip in the road. You drive, and they're going, and they're going,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
That's the Lily Lake Gap, where water comes squirted out and still goes out toward the Kishwaukee. Right, there is like a Kane County, Continental Divide, County Divide around this area, and we got water that goes right here into the Kishwaukee, into the rock, and you know, into the Mississippi. Very close to where you are right here. But you got water coming down here, you got water coming down here, you guys are right here, and then you got this, which I really believe formed it in a unique way at a different time. The other thing is the LiDAR images show some really weird, like, concentric formations, just west of 47 there, which I think are just really interesting. So that's the Lily Lake Gap. That's the Pearson Canyon. That's about where you are, right? So let's ask the question, did the water from Glacial Lake Pingree take an epic U-turn? And I believe it did. I believe that at one time, there was stagnant ice all up in here. Who knows what this was like, but I believe there was stagnant ice all up in here, and the water from Glacial Lake Pingree went here. You ever see this area north of Virgil? It's flat. It's like a flat, outwash area. And so I think what happened is that the water came out and still goes out toward the Kishwaukee, but there was enough water at one time in that outwash plain that when the ice melted back, it decided to go east. And it went east through your subdivision. Right? So this is the Lily Lake Gap to this day. You're on Silver Glen Road, one of the prettiest views I think around, because Silver Glen Road's high. It's on Lake Shore, and you're looking south on Silver Glen Road, and you see this wonderful swale. It looks like a peaceful kind of swale. And that's the outwash plain to the west of the Lily Lake Gap. Right? So you have water kind of coming through that area, settling there. That's the area north of Virgil. And then at some point in time, the water decided to come east through Pearson Canyon. And I believe the reason why the water started to come east through Pearson Canyon is that the ice melted and gave it the opportunity to come east. So this is a little video, what caused the Lily Lake Gap. And there is some conjecture here, just warning, there's some conjecture here.
I think it's pretty obvious that we had multiple catastrophic events happen, from the balling Alorod to the Younger Dryas.
About the time the Lily Lake was melting. I mean, the ice sheets are melting.
From a mass extinction of animals across the globe, to sea levels rising 400 feet, to the mile-thick ice sheets across all of Canada melting within just a few hundred years. Clearly that's going to have some impacts on the planet, and the erosion that we see here would obviously tie right into that. And the key thing you want to keep in mind as we're looking at the map is that all of these landscapes were radically altered between about 15 to 10,000 years ago. During this time frame, the global climate got both considerably warmer and then considerably colder and then warmer again, and became multiple catastrophic events.
While I'm not saying that Lake Pingree is Lake Missoula, there are some interesting correlations.
And if you go through and read some of the Native American myths from this region, they all talk about this massive wall of water and these floods, and this gives you the perfect context for what they're talking about. As it pulsed through this narrow gap, it continued down the Columbia River Gorge all the way out to the Pacific Ocean near Astoria. In fact, there was so much water coming through here that this whole region here down to Eugene was kind of like a back flood. So you had so much water just pulled all the way down to here. and then eventually went out.
So, the Lily Lake Gap, you know where it is? 47, north of Lily Lake? Dr. Curry said that the Lily Lake Gap might have been something through which water flowed like a lazy river. But then again, if glaciers were calving and causing water to move about significantly, we might have had something called an incision take place in the moraine. The Marengo moraine has a very distinct gap right north of Lily Lake.
Right there, see it? Took something to break through that.
Here we see an animation of water flowing through that gap into an outwash area
That's you.
west of Lily Lake. That outwash area is clearly defined. We also see the development of ice-walled glacial lake plains to the north of Glacial Lake Pingree. All this melting is contributing to water flowing into the outwash plain and then out through the Fearson Canyon. In this animation, we are seeing glacial Kane County at about 24,000 years before present. We are looking from the south end of Glacial Lake Pingree toward the north. Already we are seeing glacial features that are present in our landscape today, like the Marengo Moraine and the Gilbert Strip. We are seeing caves forming and also eskers from water flowing in and through and under the glacial ice. On top of the glacial ice, ponds are forming as the glacier. Eventually, as the ice subsides, these ponds become what we call ice-walled glacial lakes. These lakes form, combine, and gather into something called Glacial Lake Pingree, which then pierces through the Lily Lake Gap toward the outwash plain to the west. Eventually, Glacial Lake Pingree and that outwash plain drain away, first through Fearson Canyon, and eventually then through the creek system that we can see today flowing from the bed of Glacial Lake Pingree.
So again, why didn't it go east? Because there's ice there. Why could it start to go east?
This video here was taken in New Hampshire, and I thought it was a great visual in regards to the Wooloola Gap floods, because at Wooloola Gap, that's where a lot of the water got stuck at and began to back up. So this is a great visual to show you how when the water is filled with ice, not to mention the trees and rocks and icebergs and all that, it really changes the dynamics of those floods, and this just helps to give you a sense of scale. If we look at this video here, this also reveals an important point. When that narrow gap got constricted and filled with icebergs and rocks and trees, eventually the pressure got so intense that the floods started to back up and go in the reverse direction. There's actually stratigraphic proof that shows that this happened during those Ice Age floods. The current of the rivers reversed because there was so much water trying to get through a narrow area. And then as these icebergs and rocks and trees get forced through that gap every so often, the water gushes down, these floods clear out a little bit, but then there's another constriction, and this keeps happening over and over again, which leaves us a lot of really interesting evidence throughout the scablands.
Again, the scale of what we see in Kane County is quite a bit different than what we see out west, and yet there are similarities. If you look to the right and to the left of the Marengo Moraine, you'll see that the ice-walled lake plains to the north are much less eroded than the ones to the south, suggesting more water flowing through that area. Also, there is some evidence of those giant current ripples that we see out west. Something else that's kind of interesting is this hydrologic backflow curl, where water seems to be backing up and curling around. And then there's the Fearson Canyon and the drainage from that outwash lake to the east through that deep canyon. All of this speaks to something quite a bit more significant going on than what we might call a lazy river.
Another factor to consider is isostasy. This is when you have miles of ice pressing down on the earth, the ice melts, and now the earth is rebounding and actually rising in elevation. This would also affect how the water was moving in and out during these chaotic times.
We see as the glacier more fully recedes that the outwash lake to the west of Lily Lake drains through channels that we still see today. The stranded ice that formed the ice-walled glacial lake plains melts away, and perhaps glacial rebound is causing this area to spring up, separating the Kishwaukee watershed from the Fox River watershed. One of the interesting things that we note at this time, not only does the lake drain, but it separates from the west to the east, especially at the Fearson Canyon. We can see again many of those streams that flow from the bed of Glacial Lake Pingree on our maps here and now.
Yeah, so the liquid heart of Kane County is still beating because all of our northern Kane County streams still flow from the bed of Glacial Lake Pingree. Jelks, Tyler, Bowes, Fitchie, Pearson, they all flow. And Pearson doesn't flow into the Kishwaukee anymore, does it? So at some point in time, that was broken. That flow was broken. And it might have been from isostasy where there's rebound. It might have just been, you know how water moves, it goes where it wants to go, and it got tired of going north and west and said, well, this is easier to go east, I don't know. But these are just really interesting areas. Again, this is Empire Road. This is your subdivision, right? I think we're probably on the other side of the creek somewhere right now. I don't know where. Right? You can see where Glacial Lake Pingree, the bottom of Glacial Lake Pingree was. This is where the Kishwaukee River drains, right by the Lily Lake Gap. But if this was all ice, and something happened to break through the Marengo Moraine right there, it could have been, I think, a pretty significant flow. Because look at the back and forth. You think of that, the constricted water going back and forth, forming those ripples. And then also, if it can't get where water can't go where it wants to go, what does water do? It backs up, and I think this is a super interesting geological formation. You know, where the water was just like, it couldn't get back there, so it's curling back and eddying around, right? And so it flowed into this area, and then it flowed as the ice melted down through this area. And then at some point, something happened where it said, okay, you go east, you go west, and never the twain shall meet from that on. You know, whether it was isostasy or what. So you get
Where's that Lily Lake Gap? What's the cross?
If you go on 47, here's where 47, and I think, here's Lily Lake, I think like right here is the Lily Lake Cemetery off of 47.
Okay.
So if you stay there at the cemetery and look north, you're kind of looking up the throat of Glacial Lake Pingree. But I think one of the best views is on right here. This is an area of lakeshore, and it's the Strom Farm, which is now a farm that's in farmland protection. The Stroms learned that their farm was essential for water reclamation, and so you know, they've agreed to put their farm in farmland preservation because they know how important it is for the county. So all this area is Strom Farm. And isn't it interesting that you have a water system down here?
Yes.
Well, where's all that water going? It all wants to come from the northern reaches of Glacial Lake Pingree down toward here, still, even underground. And so lo and behold, you've got like a water system, right, you know, over there somewhere. But it's in the meantime eroded through. So there's this creek through here, and I got feeding Pearson Creek, and now it comes out through here. But yeah, if you go between Silver Glen and like I say, the cemetery around 47 is where that gap was. Yeah.
So you're talking about Pearson Canyon, is that the deep parts of Pearson Creek now?
Yeah. Yeah. And kind of the ridgy areas that you've got in your subdivision right
Yeah, because several of us are on that ridge and we look right down.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, there's not many areas in Kane County that have that kind of dramatic topography, you know, which is why this is kind of a fun place to be. So any questions? I mean, that's kind of it. What did I do? Oof. Not bad.
Our hills and valleys that we're right here in, that's erosion.
Yeah, most of the hills and valley now that you have is erosion, for sure.
Erosion of what, glacial till?
Probably, it could have been, it could have been coming through this way. It could have, you know, filled up enough to come like down this way. As you can see, you've got pretty significant grooves from Glacial Lake Pingree, the bed of Glacial Lake Pingree. So there could have been water flowing through that way. Again, think about all that ice moving back and forth and moving back and forth. You know, it probably could have happened at a later time, because I think this is a little bit more aggressive topography than this over here. So it suggests it's a younger topography. You know, but yeah. So, you know, and when I think of farmland preservation, I just think of, I don't know, do I have this slide somewhere? Let's see if I can find this slide here. So this is how we divide up Kane County these days. We've decided that we've got three lines in Kane, three lines in Kane County. We've got our Fox River Valley urbanized line, we've got our rural line, and then we've got this yellow line that we don't know what to do with, right? It could be subdivisions, could be whatever, but in the minds of politicians, we like to see three nice lines, you know, divided up into three. But if Glacial Lake Pingree is in the northern part of the yellow section, and if most of our streams still flow from Glacial Lake Pingree, then what are we doing to our shallow water aquifers? You know, but if we're just going to pay those things over, you know. So yeah, great, yellow. Let's build houses there. But I'm on the Kane County Climate Action team that's been meeting since last summer, and they're starting to do community outreach to respond to some of the things that are going on. And my suggestion has followed through this whole time, that we really need to do a study about which of these areas in Kane County really work the best for us in terms of green infrastructure. Which areas do help us retain water? Which areas do help us, you know, keep habitat? Which areas? And so I just don't think you can divide it into thirds and say, there's the green space, there's the urban space, and here's the space we can develop. I just think we need to be more thoughtful than that. You know, but that's my personal thing.
The end of our agreed upon time. There are going to be a lot more questions. And so what I want to do is to, for those of you who want to get away or need to get away, to give you an opportunity to take off. And then, are you willing to stay around and answer questions for everyone more time? Yeah, okay, really good. And so if you have questions about anything that you've seen and that come out of a new appreciation of this, they will be here to answer. And I also want to give you an opportunity to talk about the Glacial.
The tour. So we did have a bus tour of all the Kane County forest preserves that are impacted by Glacial Lake Pingree. It was a 56-passenger bus, luxury bus that had AV and had screens. I can show some of this stuff. And last December we filled it. And people have been asking if we're going to do it again. The Elgin Garden Club wants to do it, and so I've got a bus that I think is already half filled. So if you're ever looking at Tree Line magazine for the Glacial Lake Pingree Circle Tour, bus tour, that's the tour that I lead, along with Art McKittrick and others from Kane County Forest Preserve District, through all these, I think, really beautiful areas here in Kane County. And, you know, Douglas asked, you know, I don't take any money for this. I'm happy to do it. But if you were ever moved to donate anything, I am trying to get some Glacial Lake Pingree signage in our forest preserves. And none of our forest preserves say anything about the existence of Glacial Lake Pingree or you know, the glacial history of Kane County. And so, you know, I've been working with the forest preserve. I think I'm going to get one sign this year. So
You should get a sign here in the wine days.
I think you should have a sign here in the wines.
We're working on signage now.
I think you should totally have.
Yeah.
But don't forget, if you put it here, I'm going to tell people it's here. So put it someplace you want people to find. So just saying, people. Because I think it is a significant story, and I would be happy to give you some content related to that signage. And I'm thinking like your typical 2-foot by 3-foot park district sign. You know, I could probably send you a link to people who make those kind of things. So.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Wonderful.
Always fun to talk about your rabbit holes.
Yeah.